Hello and welcome to a new review. My name is Astro Figures, and today we are taking a look at the Transformers Studio Series, Transformers the Movie Constructicon Scrapper. Taking a quick look at the box before we jump right into the video. Right here we have the open view of the figure himself, and it looks pretty cool. On the right we have the nice box art of the vehicle and robot modes. Flipping around, that's a continuation of that art. At the back of the box here we have Devastator against the Dinobots in the movie, and then of course we have some product shots of the figure. So here we have some accessories. It looks like it comes with probably 3 different accessories, 2 different blasters. You can see some weapon storage there on the actual vehicle mode. And of course this is part of Devastator, so this is the first of the 5 different packages that you can get for the figure. On the other side there is Devastator with the continuation of that one of 5. So that is the box really quick. Let's jump right into the figure without further ado. And here we have Constructicon Scrapper straight out of the box. And I have to say, he looks great. First up, we're going to look at details before we get into anything else. And I have to say, looking at the head sculpt, it's very interesting head sculpt. The kind of top of the head here has this very interesting square design to it, which leads down to his helmet. Now, whether this is intentional or not with like screen accuracy, I'm not sure, but I do find it does give a little bit of uniqueness to him, and I don't mind it actually. I find it does look really cool. Now, with the actual head sculpt itself, I love the kind of black, not fully black, it's like a grayish color for the helmet, and then you have the silver detailing with the top of the helmet, and then the bottom faceplate there looks really great. Breaking that up is the red goggles there, which look awesome. There's no light piping, so it is just kind of a matte red, but still it does look nice, and it does match this red that's on the chest plate here. Speaking of the chest plate, we'll look down towards that. Love the different details going on. You have the Decepticon logo smack dab in the middle. It gives off this little metallic shine, which is really cool. So it looks shinier depending on how you look at it, which is really, really neat. Looking on the right side here, we have kind of 2 different buttons, plus this cool like wiring detail going on there. Just gives a little bit more detail with the figure. And then over here, we have these 2 slashes with the black. Nice kind of break it up with the purple, going down to the purple here. Really, really cool, encapsulate the figure nicely. And then these lime green arms look awesome. And then breaking down towards the legs here, we've got these nice silver legs, really, really shiny. Same with the chest plate, it's very shiny as well. And then back down to the lime green. So overall, a bunch of different colors going on. It's just not all lime green. Now when we get into vehicle mode, you'll see a lot more lime green than anything else. But overall, I think that's great. I think with Devastator, he is mostly lime green. So just with keeping up with accuracy, that makes sense. And overall, I think the figure looks really, really great for that. And again, like breaking up the lime green with the different purple and the metallic silver there looks awesome. So overall, for details, it looks really great. Bringing in some weapons, we have his little blaster here. You can see right through it actually, in that little hole, which is really cool. But you have a lot of different molding and details going on, just different slashes. You got really cool in-depth detail in the slash there, which is really neat. Down to the barrel, it kind of shrinks up and then enlarges, which is awesome. So lots of details going on. It looks like there's like almost like a flashlight here at the bottom. And you can peg that in right to either of his hands, giving off a little bit of weaponry for Scrapper there. So overall, really cool. You can get him into different poses, which we'll get into a little bit later. Now coming up with his second blaster here, it's molded in all purple. Lots of different things going on. You start off really, really big here at the back, coming down into like a little smaller there. Looks like this up here is like a scope, which is nice. There's cool piping going into that. And there's different like lines and stuff to just break up the actual mold itself. So looks really great. You can peg that also into his other hand. Now it is a little bit bigger. I'm presuming that this is actually for Devastator himself and not Scrapper, but this does come with Scrapper here to kind of break up the cost between the figures. And coming up with the third blaster here, it's a little more streamlined. There's not much going on. Kind of looks like a barrel, which we'll get into in just a second. A couple different pegs and holes here. Those will come in later, which we'll see. There's kind of two different holes going on, but overall you can just peg this straight into his hand. Now with connecting your two purple blasters, here there's this kind of peg which will go into this hole here. You can go like so and create a super long blaster. Now this is what I meant why I think that this is part of Devastator's actual weapon and not solely Scrapper's, because this is way bigger compared to him. It's almost as tall as him actually, which is pretty cool. Now you can actually still get Scrapper to hold this, but again, it is a little bit bigger as you can see. So overall, still a really great addition, and it does break up the cost between the figures, but as you can see, it's quite a bit bigger than him, and not sure if you could exactly hold it. Now, with that said, you can actually get it into both hands, but it is a little bit tricky to do, and it doesn't look the greatest. So you can see here, it doesn't look too great, but still is possible to get in both hands. And I mean, you can kind of get it to where you can kind of fake it out, but still, as you can see, it doesn't look too great. Now, some negatives before we get into our points for the detail section of this video. I do want to kind of knock a couple points for the holes here that's going on. This is for transformation where the actual hand will go, but still it doesn't look the greatest. And then you have kind of the holes up here. When you have it kind of hidden like that, it hides it, but if you do any sort of, pose, if you have him up kind of raising his hand in any way, you can kind of see that holes coming through, which doesn't look the greatest, but if you have it straight on, looks great. Another thing with the back of the legs, you can see here there's two massive craters in his feet right here, which again don't look too awesome. From the side it doesn't too bad, but straight on if you're looking at him from behind, doesn't look that great. So just a couple of things I wanted to point out before we get to final scoring for this section, but overall I think he looks pretty spectacular. Here is the side of the figure just to see what he looks like with the kibble. Honestly, it doesn't look too awful. Overall, like I like the scooper, it makes sense. I like seeing how it's behind him. It looks very menacing, especially with the different claws here. But overall, I think it's not awful. It could definitely be worse, but for what it is, I think this is really great. So it doesn't bother me too much. And like I was mentioning with this pose, you can see a lot of that holes coming through. Doesn't look too great, but it is what it is. So for final scoring for this section, I will say I will give him an 8. An 8 out of 10 I think is very reasonable. Overall, I love the presence of him. He looks great. This is the ideal sort of Constructicon. This is what I think of when I think of the Constructicons. This is a really nice kind of lime green with a little bit of purple. I love the addition of the silver. It kind of breaks up the different colors very nicely, and even the details with the kind of wiring and the Decepticon logo being really shiny, which is awesome. But I do have to say, knock a couple points for those empty spaces kind of in between. Doesn't look the greatest if you kind of want to get them in any dynamic poses, which we'll get into in another section. But still, I think 8 out of 10 is a still really good score for this figure. Now let's jump into the second section of posability. First up, we'll start up at the top and we'll work our way down. So with a head sculpt, you can move it side to side. It is on a ball joint, so side to side movement. Move it all the way around if you want to. You can look up slightly, and you can look down a little bit better than up. With the arms, you can move it all the way. You do kind of have to position a little bit to get past the scoop, but they can move 360. Looking at just above the elbow, you can spin it 360 as well. At the elbow, you can bend just about to 90 degrees. You can also, if you wanted to, move the other way. Now this is part of transformation, and it doesn't look the greatest. He's obviously breaking his arm there, but it is an option if you want it to be. There's no waist articulation with the legs. You can kick them forwards to about there, and then kick them back to about here. Yeah, I do have to kind of maneuver around the scooper again. Just be mindful of that if you want to get them into more dynamic poses. Up here at the thigh, you can actually spin this all the way 360. Now at the knee, you can bend this just about to 90 degrees right there. Nothing kind of in the way. And then with the feet, you can move them side to side. You can rock them side to side. Get them all the way there so you can get them into the splits. So if you wanted to. And then as well, you can get the feet to actually move forwards, which is really neat. So you can kind of get them to rock forwards, do the Michael Jackson if you want them to. So overall, not too bad. Now, also with the arms, I forgot to mention that it does have this sort of little joint, butterfly joint, I believe is what it's called, where you can actually hinge it a little bit out. This is where it starts, and you can hinge it a little bit out. So you can kind of get them in a little bit of more dynamic poses, have them kind of posted up. Now, looking at some of the poses you can do off with this figure, overall, I think he's a 7 out of 10 for score. You can get him in some pretty decent poses, but I think there's some things I would want out of him. Like there is no way to move the figure, or move the hand, sorry. You can only kind of move it a little bit in. There's no way to kind of rotate it. Then there also is no waist articulation, which does kind of suck. But overall, I think it does what you want for a figure, and I do love the addition of the kind of joint here that you can move the arms in or out. I think that does kind of make up for some of the things missing. But again, overall, pretty good score for this figure. Now let's jump into transformation. Hey, what's this? There's something in my figure. Here, let's pull it out and see what it is. Set you aside. Who put this in here? What does it say? Oh, look at that. Subscribe. Huh, cool. Anyway, let's get back to the transformation. So wrapping up the transformation before we get into looking at the vehicle mode in full, I think overall it is a very easy transformation. There's nothing too complex going on about it. It doesn't mean it's not enjoyable. I think overall a nice 7 out of 10, kind of middle of the road, easy to complete but not difficult. not complex, I mean, overall, just fun. Rolling onto the battlefield, Scrapper looks amazing. I love the vehicle mode for this. Overall, it's very simple, but I think it gets the point across very well, and there is a lot of really cool details that go into it. With the scooper here, you can do a little bit of the posability. You can have him pick something up, bring it up to there, and kind of take it up and drive it off, which is awesome. For rollability, I think he's fine. I think it could be a little bit better. I find some of the wheels don't roll nearly as well as others do. I think the front do better than the back, but overall it's fine. For details here, you can see on the sides of each of this vehicle, there's actually a little bit of a ladder going up to the cockpit there, which is really cool. It's on both sides there. It's part of the arms, so you can see that in the robot as well. The wheels themselves are actually pretty cool, and I love the fact that it's differentiated with the silver there on the black. The silver looks awesome with the different bolts going onto the tire, which is pretty cool. The scooper himself, again, has those different teeth going through it just to help pick things up. The cockpit here has the purple window on the side, on the front there, and on the other side. You can see even here, I assume this is kind of a back window as well. The back doesn't look, as great as the front, but overall I think it gets the point across. And looking at the back, the bottom here, you can't really tell it's a robot. I mean, there you can kind of see the chest piece, but if you were looking at it, you could kind of think that's the motor. So overall, not too bad. And looking as well, I just seeing this, there's kind of like this grilling detail on this piece here, just beside the ladder, almost like a stand, which is neat. So this is on the tops of this as well. So lots of different details going on. Looking at the top of the back of the vehicle, there's a couple different clips going on, which we'll see with the actual weapons here. You can clip onto the back, so there is weapon storage in the vehicle mode, just not in the robot mode, which is a little unfortunate. So we'll see here on each of the weapons, there's a clip. So here on the if you're looking at this, the right side has this little magazine almost, and you can clip that into the back. You can see how that looks. So looks okay. Not the greatest, I find, but overall I think it looks okay. There is another mode that you could have the vehicle in with the two different pieces you can split apart and have two separate blasters. So on the kind of longer blaster, you can see there's this little tab in here that you can push into here. So you're just going to take that empty space and you're going to push it into that tab. You can see here he has actual blaster, so you can have him, in a battle ready mode, kind of blasting away at the Autobots, which is awesome. You can see how that looks on the backside as well. It's almost like a rocket launcher, actually. You can have your, full on rocket shoot through, which is really cool. And then taking the other blaster, you can actually just see here on the bottom, there is that tab again. So you're going to tab that into this side here, just like so. So you can have him have a massive blaster there on the left side, and then the kind of smaller or rocket style on the right, which looks pretty cool. If you have the two blasters here on the sides, you can't actually place this in just because of how it's situated. It's not going to fit. So a little unfortunate with that. There is no other place to kind of peg this into, which I think would have been really cool. Now, if they had done that, say here, it would have broken up the kind of ladder, which, I do like that ladder detail a lot. So I think, some compromises had to be made there, and I think overall it does look pretty cool. And, you can just have these off to the side too if you don't want them on, so that's up to you. Now, for points for the vehicle mode, I think an 8 out of 10 is very much warranted here. I love the playability with the scooper here, picking different things up and kind of driving them off. The weapon storage is pretty cool to have in vehicle mode, and I do like the style that you can have with both the purple blasters. It is unfortunate that you can't get that third blaster, and oh, hold on. Actually, I'm kind of in. Hold on. Sorry about that. You can get the third blaster in. Okay, so yeah, so 8 out of 10, definitely warranted. I didn't realize that you could actually peg that into the purple blaster there. So you can have this super mega mode kind of weapon mode here with your rockets and then your kind of big laser and then your smaller kind of weapon there on the side. So that does look pretty cool actually. That's my fault for not realizing that. So yeah, so you can have all three kind of hooked up into this souped up battle mode, which does look pretty cool. Again, looking at the details, I love the different, the ladder detailing, the grilling detail, the scooper playability. Overall, it's a really fun kind of alt mode. And again, to get here, it is simple, not too complex, but fun to get into it. So you can kind of transform from robot to vehicle and then vehicle to robot in a very quick manner, and it gets done very, very well. So 8 out of 10. Now, coming into the last section of value, is this figure worth the price? Now, to keep in mind, this is a Voyager figure, and he is part of the Devastator. So this is the first figure out of the 5 different packages. I think in total it's 6 figures, but there is that 2-pack command class box that has 2 figures in it, obviously. So for the first figure, this is a Voyager class. I think overall he feels very nice. I love the details going through him. Lots of great details, again, with the molding, with the paint, even with the accessories. They do look awesome here. You get these standard blaster, and then you do have the kind of bigger blaster that you can combine to make an even bigger blaster, which is really cool. I believe that will kind of play into part into Devastator when you combine them as a whole. So I think that is great to kind of add to this figure. Some of the details, like the head as well, look awesome. Posability is pretty decent. I do wish there would have been like a waist articulation, but I think they give it a little bit of a better shot with the kind of moving of the arms. I do like that addition, and you can kind of get him into some cooler poses like that. Comparing him to a deluxe class, he is slightly bigger. I think just a little bit taller, and he does feel definitely a little bit heavier for sure, and more kind of secure. He is a little bit wider as well, I do believe. So he does feel the part for a Voyager. And then pairing him up against someone like Megatronus, who is a beast, he does look a little short. So let's kind of raise this a little bit. So comparing this to a leader class, it does feel a little maybe not as justified for Voyager. You can see Megatronus just towering over him, which does make sense. He's kind of a beast of a figure, but I do wish it might have been a little bit taller in that regard. Now, it does maybe make sense because he is kind of the big boss. He's kind of towering over everybody. So, whatever you kind of value there, I think is up to you. I think between this fits, and then as the kind of deluxe to the Voyager, it is not as big as I would have hoped, but still not too bad. Now, the big question is, how does he compare to the other Constructicon figures? Are they the same heights? And how does that kind of stack up? But obviously, as this is the first one we're looking at, I can't kind of say just yet. Now, final thoughts of the figure Scrapper. I think overall, I think he's really awesome. Looking at some of the points here, we're going to go over them really quickly. So for detail, I give him an 8 out of 10. For posability, 7 out of 10. For transformation, we gave a 7 out of 10 as well. Alt mode, 8 out of 10. And the value is an 8. So with that all combined, it comes to a total of 38 out of 50 points. Overall, not too bad. On the higher end of the kind of 30s, lower end of the 40s. Now, with that in mind, he did better in some and worse in some, but I think overall he's a very solid figure overall, and he doesn't have like more of a weak point versus more of a high point. I think overall he is that kind of middle of the road, not middle of the road, but very, he doesn't have a massive glaring weakness. So I think that is really great. Some of the details on him are amazing. And that's some of them not so much. The holes in him, posability again, really great. I do wish there was a waist articulation to just kind of, get a little bit more dynamic poses, but I do love the kind of joint that they put into the shoulder to kind of rock it side to side. It adds a little bit of a better kind of stuff he can do with his arms there. So that is pretty cool. I have to give him that. Transformation, simple, but not too simple. I think it's very fun to go from robot to vehicle, not frustrating at all, and kind of a blast to do so. So that's awesome with the alt mode. Very, very cool vehicle mode. I do love the playability you can have with it. I love the scooper where you can use it to pick stuff up, take it away, and bring it to some other location. The transformation, very nice, very simple, fun to transform from the robot to vehicle and vice versa. An overall value between the deluxe class, it's not super big, but it does look very nice. From leader to Voyager, it is a little bit of a bigger gap, so if you do mind that, just keep that in mind. But again, this is a combiner as well, so that is kind of added value to this as well. And obviously he combines into Devastator. We'll see that in the coming weeks. I'm not sure how long it will take, but I'm pretty sure I have all the figures, so that'll be fun to kind of combine into Devastator. So we'll see that. Without further ado, that is it for this review. If you have any questions about the review itself, or if you have any recommendations for future reviews, let me know down in the comments below. And if you have any questions or have a suggestion for what the next figure I should review is, let me know. Again, leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next review next week.